Welcome to Property Quorum. Well, you can hear from the seagulls. We've got people pumping in from all over the place. We've got Juliet, of course, I think in Italy somewhere. We've got Rowan, who is in one hospital, and Chris, by pure coincidence, in another. And here we have Hamish McClay, of course, of Such Convey, Rowan Waller of the Property Pen, Chris Gilson of Root, and of course, Juliet Babula of Gunner Cook LLP. Thank you all for attending today, and thank you all out there for continuing to stick with us. Today's topic is, as ever, one that's slightly divisive. Blurred lines when the agent's interest isn't yours. Hamish, would you start us off, please?
Right. I think one of the challenges in life is the fact that we tend to have two options about just about anything. And we can either follow the media, who like this sort of catastrophic sort of types of sort of things, and let's rake up anything we can, which is sort of seems as underhand and as dirty as possible, rather than actually go down the alternative route, which is to actually sort of hail those who are particularly sort of good, because we do have within the world of property some strange things that happen, and there's some dark sides and some very, very light sides. However, it is right that we try and get the balance. And I think something which we've spoken about is, sadly, the fact that there isn't any regulatory body specifically that looks after estate agents. There are regulations, but there isn't any particular sort of body. Does there need to be one? Well, when we actually sort of look at the regulatory body behind, for example, the quality of build, there is a regulatory body. Does it mean every single building that goes up is wonderful? Far from it, far from it. So we do need to hail those things that are right and those things that work right. So it's great that we have got Rowan here that can actually, because I've always had great respect for Rowan, because having known him for some time and seen the quality of the properties he's working with and the way he works with them, it's easy to see that there are some great estate agents out there. However, Panorama would lead us to believe that they're all as bad as each other, which is not the case at all. And I think we all know, like so often we speak of, if we actually working with the right people, we get the right outcome.
I mean, this is something that we've banged on about for some time. Find a good team, work with them, you'll get better results. Rowan, are all estate agents the same?
No, not all estate agents are the same. Not all lawyers are the same. Not all fish and chip owners are the same. So I think it's like no human being is the same. So you're going to find all sorts, and I think there's a danger of tarring all with the same brush. Also, I think there's a lot of jumping to conclusions about what estate agents are actually doing out there, and I think there's I know this is kind of in light of the Panorama piece last week, but I feel like the public are now sort of on edge dealing with estate agents, and hearing a lot about pushback from members of the public now when estate agents are just asking them some fairly basic questions about how you're funding the purchase. We need to see your proof of finance, all that sort of thing, and that's just due diligence. So I think that there are some there's a little bit of learning that the public needs to do. There's some best practice that estate agents should be following, but I think there's a need to understand the difference between conditional selling, coercive selling, which often gets called the same thing, but I think they're different, and just best practice. So that's where I come into this really.
Well, then
I have to say I'm not an estate agent.
Oh, no, but you are imbued within that organisation of estate agents. Yeah. Before we lose her again, I'm going to quickly bring in Juliet. It seems that not all estate agents are the same, not all lawyers are the same. But since the Panorama programme last week, there certainly seems to be a frisson of activity in the press about what might or might not be the right practices. Do we need extra regulation with more teeth, Juliet?
Who's going to police the regulation with more teeth? That's my question. You know, you
Good
say
question.
you can't do this or you should do this or whatever. It boils down to the individual ethics, I think, because you've got an estate agent showing someone a property, they make a couple of comments and they know exactly how to read the psychology of the room. So they can say, you know, the wife likes the kitchen, they sell that to them, whatever, whatever. And then when it gets to the legals, they will point blank that's not, you know, they're not to be held accountable for that. So ultimately, it's you as an individual who need to hold your hands up and say, look, I've done something that's not right or that, you know, is unethical. And that's where the industry, you know, is lacking, because the qualifications for an estate agent, I don't know. I mean, this morning I saw there's the estate agent, there's an act that governs estate agencies. It's an act that was brought in 1979 to try to dissuade negligence and things like that. But if you can count how many claims are actively pursued against estate agents, firstly, it's expensive. Secondly, you've got to come up with your evidence. Where are you going to get evidence if all you've got against them is oral stuff or verbal things that they've said? You've got no concrete evidence. So it sometimes comes down to waste of time. And I completely agree. It boils down to a personality. Everyone is different. Everyone, the stakeholders in this industry are different, whether you're in it for money or you just want to help people, whatever it is a different thing. And it's that thing that drives the individual that ultimately leads to the outcome or the output. So I'm not sure if more regulation is the answer, because we can say, yes, you know, you can't do this, etc. And whether or not you can then police it is a whole other story.
Chris, it seems to me that it's a whole minefield. Oh, Chris, I lost you for a second. Let's try that again. It seems like a whole minefield for someone who is a professional investor like yourself. I suppose building that team that you can actually rely on is critical.
The thing is, Gareth, to be an estate agent, the bar is very, very low. I think I'd need more qualifications to be a greengrocer. That's not to be disparaging to estate agents. It just means that obviously property being a high value, a big ticket item, it attracts all sorts of people. And like I say, it's because the bar's very low, anyone could set up an estate agency business, find a shop on the high street and start trying to get listings to sell houses. The thing that most people forget when they go into an estate agent is most people that go into an agent, they're normally buyers. They seem to forget that the agent is not working for them. The agent is representing the vendor and the vendor's interests, and they will be trying to get the best possible price through a whole selection of different sales tactics out of those buyers, the punters that are going into that estate agency business. And that's not neglected, it's just forgotten most of the time. The people going in, they think that they're acting as a consumer, and they've got all sorts of rights and privileges that have been bestowed upon them, and it's not the case. You're on the wrong side of the agreement in this scenario. So yeah, it is a case of caveat emptor, buyer beware. Go in with your eyes open. Expect them to probably try and pull the wool over your eyes a little bit, and it's why the level of there's an underlying current of contempt with a lot of estate agents. And you see it, to be quite frankly honest, when you go into an estate agency, as a buyer, certainly as an investor, I am treated to some extent with that level of contempt. Well, I don't care, so it's no big deal for me. But you just need to be aware that as a buyer, go in with your eyes open, expect that, understand that you are not the client. Although ironically you will ultimately be paying that estate agent their fee, but yeah, that goes via the vendor. So it's only the vendor that they're representing, and that's a very, very much a forgotten angle in this. So I didn't see the panorama expose, but I might to have a look at the highlights.
It is a little bit more comical than one might imagine. The expose, it's so blatant in parts. But what I would say is that you say they're not representing you, they're representing the other side. Surely they're just representing themselves.
To an extent, yes. I mean, they're in business for themselves, to make a profit. But they got to walk a fine line. They do have to represent the vendor to the best of their ability.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean taking the highest possible price. It means finding the most committed buyer in the circumstances who will complete upon that transaction. So there's no point taking an offer from a first-time buyer that's 100 grand over what the listing is for, because they're not going to get the financing in that scenario. Ron's absolutely right. There is some level of due diligence that has to happen. So as a buyer, I would expect to be quizzed on how am I going to fund this transaction, and can I demonstrate that I can fund this transaction? That's pretty basic stuff. Why would they want tire kickers in the shop? I mean, if you can't buy the Mars bar, get out of the shop. I mean, you can't just sit in the newsagents reading the papers all day, can you? So it's the same principle.
Yeah, I see your point. Rowan, come on, you can rip a strip off me now for tarring everyone with the same brush. But there's a lot of negative commentary flying around at the moment, surely aimed at the estate agency community. And it's a bit sad because, as Juliet points out, what are you going to do to try and police this? Who's going to police the police?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually, you just said it was a bit comical, the panorama piece, and it was blatant in parts. But actually, I didn't think it exposed too much. I thought that there was no smoking gun, there was no hard evidence. They didn't actually insist. To be honest, like when I was in an estate agency, when I was working in a estate agency, if I knew that I'd had panorama in for a week, I would have been pooping my pants in what they might have uncovered, because there's all sorts of sort of malpractice that goes on, and it's murky practice rather than malpractice. Okay, and actually, I've never done conditional selling, but that was the main kind of accusation in this piece, and I didn't actually see conditional selling. I don't think conditional selling was evident. There was a bit of coercive selling, which is where I think people might have felt like they were more likely to get their offer accepted if they used the financial services, for example, that the estate agent had. But there was actually no evidence of the estate agent saying, we're going to take somebody who's using our financial services, so squash the other offers. There was no evidence of a cash offer not being put forward, which is actually what the investigator told the vendor had happened. But that's just a lie. That didn't happen. The cash buyer didn't make an offer. And actually, what we do know now is that there were 4 offers over the asking price made. 4 offers over the asking price made. The offer that was chosen was the highest offer, and that offer did happen to be using the financial services for that was in-house in that estate agent. Okay, now we might have a question mark over that, but we can't say that wasn't the best offer. It was the highest offer. And what I would say is that perhaps, if you were a skeptic, you might say, did they push the other buyers as hard to make a better offer as they might have done?
Oh, you got there before I could say it. You got there before I could say exactly that, Rowan.
This is where I think the grey area is in the murky practice, and I think, I mean, and in the estate agents involved, these people following a company line, and I was a corporate estate agency, and you do that. You're there, you're hitting targets. You've got all of these different KPIs to hit. And I think that's where the trouble comes in for a state agency. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think policing is really going to stop that. The only thing that will stop that is a regulation that says you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to have in-house services. You're not allowed. But it's not only corporates. When I went independent, when I set up my own estate agency, there wasn't a mortgage broker I ever met that didn't. Do you know what? There's one. There's one mortgage broker called Mark Kavanagh, MK Mortgages. He would absolutely refuse to do any kickbacks to estate agents. Okay, but most other, I can't remember another mortgage broker I ever spoke to that wasn't trying to say, look, if you send the mortgage my way, I'll give you 25% of my prop fee. Okay, and I was an independent estate agent. And actually, I was thinking, that's I could get an extra 250, 300 quid for a sale, by putting the mortgage their way. It's, this is rampant in the whole industry. This is not down to just the big players like Connells or Chancellors or Countrywide, we're now part of Connells. This is small independents on the high street. It's probably individual self-employed agents through under umbrella groups who've got a tame mortgage broker on the side. it's not just mortgage brokers, it's lawyers as well. You've got conveyancing firms offering 200, 300, 400 quid to an estate agent for referring services over, and they might not be the best solicitor choice out there. So and you're not safe from that going to an independent estate agent.
Understood. Well, look, I mean, Hamish, it seems to me that we've got a basic phrase here to live up to, which is just because everybody does it doesn't make it right.
Well, not necessarily, but I mean, we all breathe. I guess that's probably right. There are different ways. All of us, I believe, have different business models. I mean, it's much the same in terms of the type of work that we actually sort of do, and even the people that we actually sort of work for. And it's not as there are some people that will actually sort of give kickbacks. There are people who endeavour to give me kickbacks for certain things. And I don't need to do that because I make my profit from doing what I do. But there are businesses, for example, I hadn't noticed it before, and it states quite sort of clearly estate agent and solicitor. And there's no reason why those two people can't be under the same roof. It makes an awful lot of practical sense because it can save an awful lot of time, an awful lot of effort, and various sort of people because they're involved together. But the decision is, who is there somebody that you respect, somebody you actually sort of get on, because we recognize it in so many parts. People, if you go into the restaurant and you find a particularly sort of helpful waiter there, you'll give that waiter a tip. It's very rare that I won't give a waiter a tip. I won't leave a tip within that. Is it expected of me? I honestly don't know. I just happen to do it. I've always done it because I respect quality service. And you would expect the same sort of type of thing if somebody's good enough to sort of... I'm fortunate I know enough people that I can actually recommend. I don't need... The fact that I can recommend them is good enough for me. I like being able to do that. I don't have a business model that demands it.
Yeah.
There are other business models which actually sort of would. So it's so much to do with the person you're working with. Because there's quality in everybody. Whether it comes out or not in a transaction is a little bit different, but it's up to the individual to decide. But you go with that right person, you get the right level of service. And as really Rowan, who's actually sort of standing up and saying, look, this is how the system actually sort of works. There are some people that overstep the mark, and there always will be. However, there's a quality of service that you are actually going to get, which is a genuine quality of service.
But to bang the old drum, Juliet, just because a large number of people use sharp practice doesn't mean it should become accepted as a norm, and we shouldn't call it out.
We need to call it out. I think the more of us, in fact, I'll give you an example. You've got certain lenders where if someone complains to the FCA about them, they do nothing about it. But if you've got a conglomerate of people consistently complaining, then they all come wrong and an investigation then ensues. So if as a nation, we as consumers decide, look, we're going to estate agents and we're complaining because of misrepresentation, because of whatever, not being given the truth, etc., then enough of those complaints will actually lead to change, I believe, because then you're in the spotlight. So you do need to have these forums. And I'm not talking about these people who every little thing they nitpick about, etc. I'm talking about, real objectivity here, where you as a consumer feel like you've been wronged. And, when you're looking at individuals who know the game inside out and they go to an agent, they know exactly what they're looking for. They know whose role is what. But when you've got these newbies who need the hand holding, it's where people like Wendy's advice comes in. She's, got to be the one to say, you need to look out for this. This might be a pitfall. Those are the things that people don't actually see until, they get into the game and they look at it from a hindsight perspective and think, actually, I think the wool was pulled over my eyes because someone said something. And it just goes back to what Rowan said, on that panorama, there was no evidence. The fact that there was no evidence doesn't mean that the thing that was alleged wasn't true. It's just that I find that people who know this business will do things that you're not able to record or not able to have evidence of. And that's not a fair thing, and that for me is where my role comes in where I feel like I've got to, when I'm dealing with a newbie purchaser, I go all out to ensure that they actually understand the process and the system and what's involved, and everything that an estate agent might have said previously goes out the door. And I go back to my biggest bugbear, which is estate agents will do and say whatever to get a property sold because they're in it for the commission. When the lawyers get involved, it's their PI that's always on the hook for all of it. So it's not about working hand in hand with them. As lawyers, we know what's on our desk, we know what we need to report on, and it's then once you've reported to your mortgage company and to your buyer, they then need to take that view. Do we want to proceed? But it's up to the consumer, I think, firstly to know, to do your research, to get self-educated to some extent, and then choose the right individual to take you forward.
Chris, just before, and then I can take a couple of words from Chris.
It's such a generalisation to say.
Oh, gosh, go on, Rowan. Go on, Rowan.
Oh, I just think it's such a generalisation to say. It's such a generalisation to say that estate agents will do whatever they need to do to get the sale because they're just in it for the commission. And I just don't believe that. That's not the case. Actually, and I know it's hard not to generalise when we've only got 20 minutes to discuss something. But what I would say is, about kickbacks, I don't intrinsically think there's something wrong with kickbacks necessarily. What I think is wrong, that there's wrong in not being transparent about facts, and I think that's where the problem is. If there's referral fees with transparency, I don't see that there's a problem. The consumer can then make the choice, and I think that's where the agency does get really murky, because I think they can be technically transparent, but they hide the transparency somewhere in a load of paperwork that says take on your mortgage broker.
Okay.
That's where I think the industry just needs itself up.
Yeah.
Because these professions can work successfully together, and actually I would have rather worked with a mortgage broker that I knew was going to do the job.
Okay. Chris, it seems Rowan says it's fine for kickback as long as it's not in a brown paper envelope.
There's nothing wrong with cross-selling, and if you look at different industries, I mean, the banks have been at it for donkey's years, and the insurance arms and all sorts of different products and services they try and tap you into, they're just open about it. However, if the estate agents are then using that as leverage in the offers that they're presenting to their vendor, and then pre-framing those in different contexts, trying to pitch the ones where they will get a kickback, or the ones that are cross-selling their services in a better light, and that's not necessarily truly representative of the situation, then that should be called out. How you audit that? Not easy. Don't know.
Yeah, and also who pays for it? That's another question. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, I think we've actually got a very interesting balance, and it does actually sort of come down to, I believe, one major aspect that we can't necessarily judge, nor should we be judging necessarily anybody else and the activities and what they do. It's whether we feel comfortable with the person we're dealing with. And as Rowan sort of said, the more transparency there is, the easier it is to understand. And I think what we need to do, and this is a big problem, programs like Panorama do not educate people. What we need to do is to educate the general population. Say, look, this is normally what happens. It's perfectly normal for this to happen. It should be, because if these are good guys and somebody's recommending them, why shouldn't we be actually sort of sharing in it together? So it's a matter that again, there is that somebody out there that will satisfy the requirements that you need. It's up to you as an individual. We keep forgetting this. It's up to the individual to actually consent to what is going on. You can't blame somebody afterwards if you haven't looked into it in the first place. And no. I think we can actually sort of see right the way around. Many people will blame solicitors for what goes because it takes too long. Some people will actually blame the estate agent because the estate agent, like we've sort of said, they're sort of taking sort of they're not kickbacks. It's just the way it actually happens to work. But it's, as long as it's above board, that's important. And it's impossible, completely impossible, for the whole situation to be policed, because it never is actually going to work. And it's really up to those. And I think it would be sort of quite interesting, because I'm sure some of Rowan's work at the moment is to say to estate agents, what's the best way to represent yourself out there? what should you be doing as an estate agent to demonstrate, if you like, the effectiveness of what you're doing on behalf of the buyer and of the seller, because it's a two-way transaction. We do say, yes, of course, they need to sell them to actually make the money. If they don't sell properties, as we well know, not every property is sold. It's, I mean, close to 50%, if you're lucky, that gets sold. So the estate agent has to look after both of those. So he's looking to find a buyer that can afford to buy it. Otherwise, there's no point in the whole exercise, is there? So just look out where you're going. Watch the direction that you're heading in as a buyer. And as a seller, you go and work with the guy that you actually feel comfortable working with. And that way it works out.
So what we've said here is that there's a degree of personal responsibility. It's not enough to walk on the pavement. You've got to watch out where the cracks are for yourself. You can't have somebody else pointing them out to you. You need to know that they're there and make sure that you educate yourself. And I suppose it is podcasts like this one to help you see that is necessary and even help educate you. Thank you so much, Chris Gilson of Root Home, of course, Juliet Bawul of Gun & Cook, and Rowan Waller of the Property Pen, and of course our Lord Master Hamish McClay of Search and Convey, and all of you out there. I suddenly saw a great confluence of people pop in to have a listen today, so I hope you got something from it. Try and educate yourself before you get involved in what could be the largest financial transaction of your adult life. Please make sure that you're well informed and that you gather around you people who have your interests at heart as well as their own. Until next week, keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after that mental health. Bye-bye now.